All right, good morning. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the 2022 Data Standards Training. So as a reminder, this training is primarily for agency managers and for some program managers. We're going to talk really in detail about a lot of changes that will not actually be visible or impact some of your end users. We will talk about those changes as well, but we're going to talk about some more in detail changes. So the reason why we had a separate training here for agency managers is we are going to cut some of that detail out of the end user trainings that we're providing next week. The format for this training, we are recording so that agency managers and program managers who are not here, so they can attend. So we are asking if you could please sign in with your name and organization in the chat. And if you have any questions, if you could put it in the chat, we are going to stop in between sections for questions and answers. So we'll let Maria go ahead and kick it off. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning. Thanks, Jen. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. Perfect. So for those of you that are not familiar, that are new with us, what are the 2022 data standards? So every 2 years, the data standards are updated by HUD, and they're put into effect nationwide, all on the same day. So the reason that happens is because they update, they're updated to collect new data or to update data that's already being collected within the system. So a lot of the things you'll see, it's either language changes, updates, or something brand new. So these 2022 data standards refers to the 2022 year that refers to the federal fiscal year that they go into effect. So when will they go into effect? If we go to the next slide, the changes start. One more slide, sorry. They go into effect October 1st of 2021. So that's when you guys will be able to see all of the changes updated on the live site. And this is, of course, again, in preparation for the 2022 fiscal year. So on October 1st, you guys will see all of the updates, all of the changes that we're going to go through, updated on the live site in Clarity. So just keep aware of if something's different, it's because of this. So if we go to the next slide, this is what we're going to be going over. This is just like the section headers of what is going to be covered. So we're going to be going over all changes for end users. We're going to be going over changes for HUD COC projects, as well as changes for, so I'm sorry, that third one is supposed to be 2 bullets. So agency managers, what they need to be aware of, but also VA SSVF project changes, as well as coordinated entry changes, RIHMIS program updates, and additional updates that HUD has yet to release any. We're waiting for more information on those additional updates. So we'll be able to go over all of these. And again, if you guys have any questions, just either put it in the chat. So the following that we're going to go through is the first section, which is changes for all end users. So regardless of their access roles in Clarity, regardless of what project types that they're working in, and regardless of what funding sources those projects are, they're going to be able to see all of it.
Meeting yesterday, and then he just, hold on, sorry.
That's okay. Thanks, Adam. So if we go to the next slide, please. So the first change, or the first update, is the race language field. So this update complies with HUD's definition of a client's self-identification. So the update here is that they added Indigenous, they also added Asian American, and they added African to the pick list, along with the rest of the pick list that was there. So it doesn't look like a big change, but the language was updated. So if we go to the next slide, it actually gives you a visual of what it's going to look like. So just a friendly reminder that you're able to select more than one. However, if you choose client refused or data not collected for them, you won't be able to select more than one. You'll just be able to select either client refused or the other data not collected. I thought I saw it. Nope. Okay. Yep. So the next one is ethnicity. This one was also updated, the language. So non-Hispanic or non-Latino, Hispanic or Latino, the AOX was added for parentheses. So that's the difference, that the updated that you'll see there. And that image right there is what you'll be able to select. If you go to the next slide, however, oh no, I think that was updated. So you'll be able to select either or of those. Thanks, Jen. So the next one, the next update is gender. This one you'll be able to, it's being replaced with a multi-select pick list field. So what this means is that you'll be able to select more than one of these genders. So if you go to the next slide, you'll be able to select as many genders as the client identifies with. And as same as with race, you'll only be able to select one if you choose client refused or data not collected. Does anybody have questions on that?
One question on that. What is there going to be a spot where well, there's a spot where client refused, but are we going to leave it as just client refused and not pick? Like, for example, client's not going to identify as transgender or any of the other ones they're refusing to identify. It's not really client doesn't know, but it's client refusing to identify as male, female, transgender, or any of those. Is that going to be a section 2? Because I know there's a scroll thing.
There is, but that's the scroll. So if you look at the second image below, that's what that client refused is. So it does show up there. So one of the things that other case managers have shared is literally turning the screen and letting the client see what the options are and having them choose.
That's fine.
If they, yeah, so they could choose as many as they want, or if they don't identify with either, if they could have the choice between choosing client doesn't know or client refused.
Or, well, I think, Maria, in this case also, right, like if they refused or doesn't know, we are considered data that's not getting collected. So it's counting against
Right.
your overall data quality score. So there is the questioning field now, which is appropriate for clients who are not sure how they identify, as opposed to they don't know how to give you the answer, or they're refusing to give you the answer, which I think that's the key distinction, because there is the questioning field that's been added as of October 1st. Does that make sense to everyone?
Sure. Would this be like a finding? Because I know it would be an error. So if the client is refusing, then we're not gonna assume something, right? And then have an error. You see what I mean? So how are we gonna fix this? How is this gonna be? Because it's not an error, right?
I think the response is there because there is of course, opportunity for clients to refuse, but I think that it really is in like training of the end users that are doing the initial assessments with clients to really ask questions in a way that promotes the client, participating in answering these. But again, you're right. If the client does refuse, then it is their right.
But again, it's also gonna be a finding.
It is.
So how are we gonna fix that?
That is how HUD has designed this, and it is intended to promote agencies and end users to really ask questions in a way that is encouraging client participation in answering this.
That was a great question, Catherine. Thank you. And Adam. So if we can go to the next slide. I just caught a glimpse of it. It was substance. Sorry, you're on mute, Jim. Thank you. So the substance use disorder, this is another language update. So what used to be substance use problem will now be substance use disorder. So anywhere in the system that this term was used, substance use problem, it will be now updated to substance use disorder, and it'll be throughout Clarity. If we can go to the next slide. Head of household logic. This is more of a reminder, but because we've trained on this, but each program enrollment must have at least one head of household. And if that head of household leaves the project, a new head of household has to be assigned to the program enrollment. So sometimes that won't happen, and we've addressed that with some end users, but this is just something that's going to be rolling out as well for 10/1/21. If we go to the next one. Thank you. So the date of birth logic. So as of now, the date of birth must be blank if the quality of date of birth is either client doesn't know, client refused, or data not collected. So if any of those three options are chosen for the quality of date of birth, then that means that the actual date of birth section needs to be blank. If the quality is chosen to be full date of birth reported or approximate or partial date of birth reported, then there has to be a completed date within that date of birth field. This has been active in Clarity since February 1st. However, now it's going to be nationwide. So that's why it's coming out up on this slide now. So that's really nothing new for us, but just a reminder. Housing moving date logic. So this is also kind of another reminder because I know we've trained on this before. The housing moving date must be on or after the project start date and on or before the project exit date. So there's only one housing move-in date per enrollment recorded, and that's on the project entry screen. So when you enter in your client to your project, that's where the housing move-in date is going to be. The housing move-in date, it's not going to cascade over. It's not going to be pre-populated from earlier enrollments. So every time you enter in your client into your program, that old information will not be available to you for your new project enrollment date. A banner is going to appear for any client that has any household move-in dates with errors. So just like the banner that we see here, that will pop up letting you know or alerting you or any other end user that's within your program that they have errors within their housing move-in date.
I also just want to point out, you're also seeing this fun little banner here that all of us system administrators have, that we have our account pass to. We are purposely withholding funds from our vendor BitFocus until they complete certain portions of our data, our custom data migration. So we are well aware that we owe them money, but we're not going to pay them until they do their work. So they have added this lovely banner to all of our system administrator logins, and they may pop up on certain other screenshots that we provide. So I just wanted to make sure you knew why that was happening.
It's all for a cause. So if we go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the general health status, element R7. So the following programs will now be required to collect this health status. So if the program funder is HUD-VASH, collection is only required for HUD-VASH OTH programs. For RI, that's also required for all components except for street outreach, and HUD COC permanent supportive housing programs. Now, the project type that will need to do this underneath those funders will be emergency shelter, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, and rapid rehousing. So when we're looking at the health status, the general health status, it's just a question of whether it's excellent, very good, fair, poor, client doesn't know, client refused, or data not collected. So again, that's just only for those that are funded under these sources here and for these program types here.
We're just going to stop here before we move on to see if anyone has any questions. Okay. So next, Tucker's going to walk us through some HUD updates that are related to COC funded projects. Thanks, Tucker. Good morning.
Morning. So there are two new elements for HUD COC funded COC permanent supportive housing projects. So first, so if we go to the next slide, we'll have information. So there are, one of these elements is C1, which are some questions about well-being, and second is C2, which is moving on assistance provided. So these two elements will become available on October 1st for permanent supportive housing projects. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see. So there are 4 questions under C1. And so if you complete new project starts, annual assessments, and project exits in permanent supportive housing programs, these 4 questions, client perceives their life has value and worth, client perceives they have support from others who will listen to their problems, 3, client perceives they have a tendency to bounce back after hard times, and 4, client's frequency of feeling nervous, tense, worried, frustrated, or afraid. So these questions will appear at the bottom of those screens for project start, annual, and exit. And the response values are as shown here. So it will be from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and client doesn't know, client refused, and data not collected. And this will be true for all COC funded permanent supportive housing projects that these questions will appear.
Sorry, just to be clear, and I'm sorry I asked so much questions. This is only going to be for PSH COC,
Yeah.
no other COC clients or participants.
Correct. It will not be for other project types. It'll also only be for it's also for new screens created, where HUD is not asking you to go back in time and ask the client what they thought in the past before October 1st.
Can you explain a little on how that would be phased in with the people that are already in the system? Meaning, like, I know I'm not going to ask this question historically, but is it going to be a question that we have to ask going forward to the client?
Yep. So it'll be asked. So any client who has an annual assessment due October 1st or afterwards, these questions will be on their annual assessment and will need to be completed at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this these definitely are a different variety of question than HUD has asked for before. So we know that this is certainly a change for HUD to ask this kind of question.
So this will be really important in our end user training. End users will be made aware if they are working on enrollment status assessments or annual assessments for any COC, PSH project. We will share this slide with them, but as agency managers and program managers, this is definitely something that you want to make sure that you're talking about with your staff at your next staff meeting or however you communicate with everyone to make sure, because October 1st, when they go to conduct an enrollment or complete an enrollment in HMIS or an assessment, they're going to see these questions and they cannot leave them blank.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly. Okay. And then the next slide is about moving on assistance. So this will be if you are again, a permanent supportive housing provider and you participate in moving on, there will be a service added to your PSH projects that is moving on assistance, that when your agency assists the client, helps the client with moving on assistance, we'll be able to record the service in one of these categories in order to help the client move on. But this will be, it'll be a new service available in permanent supportive housing for projects and agencies that participate in moving on. Any other questions?
No, I think we're good. Okay, so the next one is changes for agency managers to be aware of, and I believe this is Jen.
All right. So the first change, and again, this is not something that the end users are going to see. This is just something that all of you program managers and agency managers need to know, that HUD is adding 3 new potential funding sources for your project funding source. So this is related to how projects are set up. So when you get a new award, you submit a new project setup form and there's a list of potential funding sources and you have to check it off. This is adding to that list of potential funding sources. So the 3 new funding sources are all HUD. One is COC, it's the Joint Component Rapid Rehousing, or RRH, / Permanent Supportive Housing, or PSH. The second is HUD Home ARP. So this is different than just plain old home. This is the recovery home funding. So none of those awards have been made to date. These are all coming soon, but this will be an option. So if you're an agency who in the future is awarded a HUD Home ARP award, this is what you would check off on the Google form for a new project setup. And then lastly is HUD TIH, which is related to the emergency housing vouchers. So in our state, we have 2 public housing authorities that have been awarded emergency housing vouchers back in May, and that was Rhode Island Housing, and the second is Providence Housing Authority. So those 2 projects, when they're set up, will have these funding sources, or this funding source. All right. The next change that is happening, that agency, actually this should be for all users, so we'll reorder these slides, but aging into adulthood. So if you are a program that is serving minors, so that would be family programs or RIHMIS, you will be notified through a banner that you have a client that's about to turn 18. We are going to set the threshold 30 days in advance. So 30 days in advance, until, well, I'm sure after, but at least beginning 30 days in advance of when a client is about to turn 18, a banner is going to come up. We couldn't actually configure this and get our training site to throw this banner, so we don't have a visual for you. So stay tuned. HUD is still, and our vendor is still rolling out changes like every day. So what will happen is you will get a banner noting that element 4.02 and 4.03 need to be updated. So as you all know, when you enroll a family, for example, the adults in the household have in their enrollment the income and sources and non-cash benefit questions. But when you go to enroll the children or the minors in the family, those two elements are left out. So now, if this is just going to prompt you when kiddos are turning 18, that you have to go in and complete the income and sources non-cash benefits. And also as a reminder, you have to complete a release of information. So this banner will happen. We are actually not sure, so this will be a stay tuned situation, whether you're going to go back into the enrollment to complete it or do it in the status update. It wasn't clear. So as we learn how that is going to happen, we will update you. We're going to send out emails with data standards update in the subject to make sure all of you agency managers and program managers are getting these updates. And it'll be really important for you to read them. I know everyone gets a lot of emails, but these will be really important to read. Okay, next up is project end date. So exit dates. And this is not necessarily related to your end users at putting an exit date in. Well, it may be. This is, so actually it is, sorry, there's two different ending dates and exit date standards. So my apologies. This is new auto exit logic. Auto exit logic, to be clear, is not set in the Rhode Island instance of HMIS, but in the event that it was, this is the logic that it would be applied. So there are some potential, if we were to be operating under the auto exit, the COC would have to be involved in determining extended length of time that has elapsed that would trigger the auto exit. So in order for HMIS to set auto exit, our COC, our governing body, would need to make that decision of what would be the length of time established. And then for residential projects, the client's 3.11 or project ended exit date would be recorded as the day after the client last appeared in the shelter. In the case of our night-by-night shelters, it would be their last bed night, because as you know, for night-by-night shelters, enrollments can be in existence without bed nights for a period of time. And then lastly, the destination would automatically be marked no exit interview. And then it also talks about how it would be treated for non-residential projects, and that project exit date would be marked the last day contact or service was provided. And the destination also would be marked no exit. So again, we're not using this right now in HMIS. There is no auto exit functionality, but we thought it was important for all of our agency managers to know and to put it here in training, just so that in the event that we do determine that our community is going to use auto exit, we have this as a training slide. Sorry, I skipped the last one. Okay, now this is the second piece of exit. In our old implementation and the old school, you could have a project operating date that was set, and you could deactivate a program, but the exits for the clients of that program could actually be after the project stopped operating, after the operating stop end date. That is no longer. So in order for us, if you do have a project that stops operating, all of the clients that are in that project have to have exit dates that are before the operating end date. So that is new logic that's being applied. And of course, the HMIS team has always evaluated exit dates and done our very best to make sure they're not after the operating end date, but it still happens all the time. So this will no longer, we will no longer be able to end or stop or put an operating end date and deactivate a program unless all the exit dates are proper. There is a question that came into there's a couple questions here. Elizabeth is asking, oh, she's making fun of me for saying plain old home. Now there's plain home and there's recovery home. Question, is YHCP a funding source? Yes, it is. And as you all may know, Rhode Island recently was awarded a YHCP award. So we are so looking forward to setting up YHCP projects and adding YHCP. It's under RIHMIS as a funding source. So it's exciting. And then the next question is from Adam. Once a child turns 18, does the veteran status field come up? I would imagine yes, but that was not specifically indicated, but yes. And we, like I said, we're trying to configure the training site to get it to, so that we can get a screenshot of everything that will happen. So we'll try to do that for the end users. But we'll keep track of that to make sure our end users are aware of that. Thanks, Adam. You guys are so smart. All right, Maria.
This is me, actually. So we also have some changes to FSBF, which I don't think we have anybody on the call from FSBF. So we have another training for them, but there are some changes to FSBF. If we go to the next page, there are some changes to the screening questions for SSBF homeless prevention. So this kind of section is a whole bunch of questions that have been rewritten. So there are some questions about, is the screener required? What is the current household income relative to AMI? And then it continues on to the next slide. The next slide. So when was the most recent, was there a recent episode of literal homelessness? Does the client currently have a lease? Have they ever had a lease? And do they have any evictions? Next slide. Do they have an incarceration history? And if so, have they been discharged from jail? Are they a registered sex offender? And are any household members pregnant? More on this. Are they a single parent household with minor children? Do they have any children under 6 that require significant care? Are they a current resident in an area that's prioritized? And then it will create a score for SSCF homeless prevention targeting criteria. And the other change for SSBF is that SSBF is no longer required to complete all of the program-specific data elements about disability. So those fields, I think, were already not required by homeless prevention, but now will also not be required by rapid rehousing. Are there any other questions that have come up? Okay. Coordinated entry.
Yes, coordinated entry updates, and Jen's actually going to do this one. Our favorite.
All right. We are also going to be providing the coordinated entry updates to the all end user trainings next week. because we do have more than half of all of our HMIS users are also trained to enter data into coordinated entry. So this is related to the coordinated entry event. So if there are any of you who are not working in coordinated entry, which is okay, I just want to be clear. So in coordinated entry, because they're so special, instead of services, the way that services are tracked in coordinated entry, it's basically coordinated entry services are called events, which does make sense. So the list of existing events is growing. So there are 3 new events, referral events, that will be added to the coordinated entry project. So the first is referral to emergency assistance / flex fund / furniture assistance. The next is a referral to emergency housing voucher. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And the last is referral to housing stability voucher. So again, these are really, the housing stability voucher and EHV will really only be completed by the CES housing team, because those are the folks completing these types of referrals. Referral to emergency assistance, flex funds, furniture assistance, and the referral to housing stability funds will be added to the coordinated entry services. A referral to the housing stability voucher indicates there's an open subsidy that will be filled by this client. So this is not for the general CE user to use. We just wanted you to know it's there and what it means. But this is really for primarily Amy Ferguson and Melissa Beatty when a voucher is available and they prioritize the next person and refer them. The next is the referral to emergency housing voucher. So that event is actually going to likely be inferred, meaning when someone is enrolled or referred to that emergency housing voucher, again, by the CES housing team, the system will infer, will pick up that event happened and it will be an inferred event. We're still waiting on some things, as we've indicated before, to hear how it will play out in the system, and that is one of them. So we will keep you updated. Again, we're going to send out emails with any changes or updates. In the subject will be data standards update, and it will be to all agency managers. So you'll be able to look at the changes, and if there's changes that your end user should know, we will flag them and let you know to make sure you push that information out to your end users. Any questions about these? This is what the list will look like with the updated 2 events added. And again, that EHV referral is not on the list. We are not sure if it will, we think it'll show up once we have an EHV project in our system. So there's a little question mark there. But does anyone have questions about these events? Amy, we might want to put this on the CES meeting for next week to just discuss in depth for you.
Okay, I'm going to screenshot and plop into our agenda right now so we don't forget.
Awesome. All right. So again, you know, a lot of these referrals are primarily made by the CES team. So if you or your end users have a question and are not sure, they should be reaching out to the CES staff, and the HMIS staff and CES staff will work together to answer any questions. As a reminder, the HMIS staff hosts office hours every Friday. This Friday is the all end user office hour, and next Friday will be the agency manager office hour, and it rotates. And then every other week, our CES team holds an office hour. So that's a great place to go, any of those 3 office hours, to get answers to your questions. All right. Thank you, Maria. Okay. Right. So not HUD, but one of our federal funding partners, which is HHS, or Health and Human Services has a project called RIHE, which stands for Runaway and Homeless Youth. And so there are some changes to RIHE, and I think there are maybe, yes, I see Victoria's here. So there are currently two RIHE projects in our state. The first is RIHE, or Runaway and Homeless Youth Street Outreach Program, that is run by House of Hope, and it's called HYPE. Tori Kern is the primary person there. And they actually are working in coordination with Foster Forward in their Foster Forward's drop-in center. So the drop-in center is sort of currently a RIHE funded project as well, which is exciting. And then lastly, Family Service of Rhode Island was recently funded a RIHE, or Runaway and Homeless Youth Basic Center program, which is host home for children who are runaway or homeless, who are under the age of 18. So they can't access our shelter programs because they're not adults. So here are some changes that are happening for RIHE. So again, we're sharing this out here because agency managers are here. And if you're an agency manager, like from Foster Forward or House of Hope or Family Service, you need to know these. First is pregnancy status. So currently our system is configured to only ask pregnancy status if someone selects female as gender. And now, as we know, people will be able to select all or any of the 5 gender options that have been changed from one of the first slides. So now that logic is being removed. It will be asked of more than just people who identify as female. All right, the next change is the element 4.08, which is HIV/AIDS. We are no longer requiring any of these RIHE programs to collect the 4.08 HIV/AIDS data element. So this includes our Basic Center program and our Street Outreach program. So that will no longer be required effective 10/1. All right, next up is service connection. So just because it's so special, the way that services in coordinated entry are called events, there are services in RIHE that are called service connections. So service connections in RIHE are being changed. So this only applies to our Basic Center program because the Street Outreach doesn't have this as a service connection. But the service connection, just like when Maria said, throughout our whole system, the use of the terminology substance abuse is being changed to substance use disorder. These 2 service connections are being updated to read substance use disorder treatment and substance use disorder education/prevention. So those are 2 service connections that will be updated. Here's what it will look like. This is the list of the pick list of service connections for RIHE. And then here's lastly, I don't know whose slide this is. Okay, it's fine. Okay, so we are still waiting for some updates from HUD. They are very last minute sometimes. So we're waiting for some updates here to these elements. These are RIHE. So RIHE 12, formerly a word of juvenile justice system. So there's some language changes. So we will push those out in an email with the subject, data, standards, update. Also for RIHE, element 13, family critical issues, there will be a language change. And there will also globally, as they did for substance abuse to substance use, they will also be changing mental health. It will be revised where applicable. So that is not yet set in stone, but it will update you when that happens. Again, I've said it a lot of times, but when you see an email that says data standards update, I know you get a lot of emails, myself included. We read as many as we can. Sometimes we miss 1 or 2. Do not miss these data standards updates because they're going to be really important. And then we've left a bit of time here so that we can just have some questions and answers.
So yes, I have a question. I'm sorry. So going back to the ROI for the child turning 18.
Yep.
So the release of the ROI at the back of the page, at the bottom of the page, it says this release of information also applies to the following dependents. So that young adult could still be considered a dependent, correct? Would they still have to sign a new one? Or could we just continue using this ROI?
Now that's a great question. So when you think of dependent, you can't think in terms of IRS dependent. You have to think in terms of the legal and our policies and procedures. So our policies and procedures state that anyone aged 18 in the household is required to sign a release of information. So the dependents in this case, the use of that word dependent refers to minor children.
Okay.
That's a great question. Thank you, Catherine, because we're going to actually add that to the slide. So all the questions that you asked are so helpful. So please don't be shy, because we're going to add these to the end user slides, because I'm sure if you're wondering, our end users are too. Anyone else have any questions?
Sorry, I want to be clear. So everybody who's over the age of 18 must sign a release of information, even if they're part of the household with somebody else.
That is correct.
All right. Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Any other questions? All right. So as we said at the start, we are going to cut the slide deck and only present to all end users in the next 3 trainings, only elements that are going to be visible to them. So anything that's going to be visible to them as an end user in our HMIS, we will present to those slides. All of the other sort of logic stuff, we will be cutting out, funding source, all that stuff. So we certainly, the slides will be made available and the end user trainings at our LMS, but we will send out the end user slides to our agency managers, just so you can see what it is that your end users are getting for training. You're welcome to attend them, but again, you've attended this, you will get no more information there than you are here. We are tracking all the questions folks are asking both today and at all of the end user trainings, and we'll put together like a little FAQ and send that out as well. You know, I think one thing that we're going to just ask is to be patient. So October 1st, we're going to get up super early and drink a lot of coffee and get the stuff out the door to you and do as much in advance as we can. But the day of, we will still be working on making sure things are in there properly and operating properly. But as with, I mean, you saw the changes. There's not as many as last time, but there's changes. So if there's something that doesn't look quite right or isn't operating properly, just go ahead and submit a ticket to the help desk. We're going to tell our end users to go to the agency managers first. So we're going to hope our agency managers are really the conduit for us to identify if there's anything not quite right. And we will be very closely monitoring, you know, help desk that day. So if there's, and we will have an office hour that day as well. So as October 1st happens, please just be patient and communicate with us, and we'll get everything in place, operating properly. And I think that's it. Anyone have any other questions? I'm quiet. All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Give you guys an extra half hour in your day. Thank you again for coming. And we will send these slides out to you. We are going to make a few quick changes, but we'll send these slides out to you this afternoon. And I hope you all have a great rest of the week. Take care.
Thank you all. Thanks, Jen.
Bye, you're welcome. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.